Kids write well. Really well.
We're live.
Good evening. Welcome to the November 10th work session for the Lynbrook Board of Education. As always, we will begin with Mr. Yeager leading us in the salute to the flag.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated.
Serious?
We're going to now continue to stand or stand up if you're not, as we play the Star Spangled Banner by the Wind Ensemble. I think we might be able to see a display of it over here. Those voices may sing. It's okay. What do we got, Paul, 6?
32.
It's a reboot. It's a reboot. Always fixes everything.
Why don't you just say the Wind Ensemble spent a lot of time putting this and coordinating it, fill in the silence.
It was kids remote and live, right? I'm not sure everyone realizes just how impressive that is, to have all those different kids working together. Some, I believe, are remote from what I can tell, some being there, and to coordinate all that. I would gather that took a great deal of time, Dr. Burak, and logistics to pull that off. It was very impressive.
Absolutely. A credit to Mr. White and all of the students who participated in that.
And just another example of making the best of the situation we're in. So whatever aspect of it we continue to move forward, that's a great example of what's going on. For roll call, Mrs. Danino and Mrs. Marcus are not here. As we begin the meeting, it's important to reiterate, which we've done every time we've had this meeting going back to the spring. I think, Dr. Burke, what are we up to now? We have about 20 cases of COVID?
Approximately 20.
So we're balancing the needs of the community and our desire, our goal. The goal, of course, is to get everybody back in school. Get everybody back in school, to one day go back to school without masks and partitions. But in the meantime, we are battling to make sure we can keep our staff and our students safe. So it's important for all those people that have that desire to continue what we're doing, and the district is doing a great job. You know, our administration and our staff are spending immense hours addressing these COVID issues. The community has to understand that the contact tracing is something that's taking being addressed by our district. The Department of Health is overwhelmed. Government agencies are overwhelmed by that. So the reason we're closing the school down now, that Dr. Burek had announced, was because it is the responsibility of this school district to do contact tracing because of the number of cases that we have. And those cases are not taking place in our schools. Those cases are taking place because of what goes on in the community. So as much as we as a board can ask you, we can implore you, it's important to maintain those social distancing rules. Transmissions have been non-existent as far as we can tell in the school. These are all taking place outside of school. It's important to have a mask. You know, every time we've had a contact tracing, we've been informed of what's taking place. It's usually at somebody's party. It's at a house party. It's where an event's taking place where people are not wearing masks or they're not maintaining social distance. If that continues to go on as we're seeing spikes and increasing in these tests across the country and including in the state, it's going to become more and more difficult for us to keep our schools open. And the other part, just to address, is tonight is a work session, so there will not be any commentary from the community tonight. Next week, on our next board meeting, our regular board meeting, we will have community members. We are still under the executive order of the governor. We can only have 50 people present. We will have a couple of retirees here next week, as well as their family members, which will take up a couple of our spots. But after that, we will have the opportunity for the community to address the board with any other issues they may have.
May I just add
Please,
something
Dr.
to the
Beer.
whole COVID reporting? Please do not hesitate to contact your building principal or the school nurse as soon as you find out that you have been exposed or you've been tested and you've tested positive. Please don't wait, because the longer you wait, the longer it takes us to do the tracing, and then it just puts more people in jeopardy. We're trying to mitigate the spread, we're trying to reduce the spread, and the more people we can keep safe, we'd like to do that. So please, as soon as you find out if you have tested positive, please contact the school principal or the school nurse to let us know so that we can begin our work. As Mr. Belmont mentioned, the Department of Health is becoming overwhelmed now. The infection rate in Nassau County is now well over 3%. We have been notified that the Department of Health is overwhelmed and that their work in working with us is going to be delayed because of that. So Mr. Bellman is correct. We are doing a majority of the contact tracing. In my letters, I say you will be contacted by either the district and or the Department of Health. It seems that it's more so from us now, but we are getting the information, we are getting the directives from the Department of Health. They are telling us who we should be who we should be contacting to quarantine for 14 days. So I just want everyone to know that. The sooner you can get information to us, the better off everyone is. So please continue to work with us and let us know so that we can do our best to mitigate the spread. Thank you.
And along those, okay, Ms. Pasco.
Just to further that, I do some work with the Nassau County Department of Health, and I know they're pulling people from different sections of Nassau County Department of Health to do this contact tracing and to do COVID follow-up. So it is ratcheting up a little bit throughout the county. We really have to be on our best behavior, especially with the holidays coming up, and make some tough decisions. You know, everybody, kids are very resilient. They'll come out of this okay. And we'll all come out of this okay, but we have to get through it.
And you know, there was information about, you know, what upcoming districts might be doing, and we haven't had the conversation yet about after holidays and whatnot. However, I did just receive information from BOCES that now Nassau BOCES has shut down their schools for remote learning the week after Thanksgiving. So all BOCES programs are going to be on remote learning for the week after Thanksgiving.
And to follow up on Mr. Pascoff's point, you know, many people are cavalier about the fact that testing and medical information is showing us, for the most part, although I wouldn't want to risk it with my kids, that the younger populations are not suffering great consequences from the COVID, and some are being cavalier, but they have to remember these kids are coming into buildings where there are older populations. Our teachers, our staff, our administrators, our support staff are in the building. So the idea is it's not just being concerned about your kid. It's the job of this board and the administration to look out for all staff members, for all people that come into this building. It's just another reminder of the importance of maintaining social distance. Along that point, I would also like to stress the importance of understanding that this board has met, this administration has met since the beginning of COVID. As I indicated on numerous occasions, this board has met more than any other school board in the state with the frequency by which we're addressing these issues. So if you're gathering information from anywhere other than the administration, anywhere else other than from this board and from the information that's put out, the information is inaccurate. Whether you're getting it from Facebook or from emails, and then you're contacting each other or the administration or principals, you're sharing information that is inaccurate. So the information you're going to get tonight, the information you've gotten previously, the information that's put out by the administration, by the principals on a weekly basis is the only source of accurate information. So as we get into tonight's meeting, I again want to reinforce the fact that this administration has been aware of these issues from the beginning, working from the spring over the summer, constantly monitoring what's going on. And it's because of that diligence and because of that effort and the vigilance of this administration, the board, that we're able to come back to you with a lot of new information on a month-by-month basis. And we're meeting now, as we had previously, much more frequently to address any changes that take place. Before we get into some updates, if Mr. Paskoff can address correspondence?
Sure. We received a bunch of emails this month. We received one from a teacher regarding recognition for his virtual enterprise students. We received one from a parent thanking the board for reconvening the reopening task force. We received 3 from parents regarding the switch from full remote to hybrid. We received 2 from parents regarding the push for full-time in-person instruction. We received 1 from a parent regarding reconfiguring music spaces. We received 1 from a parent regarding an Owls for Change post. We received 1 from a local business owner regarding builders' risk insurance. We received 1 from a parent regarding field usage. We received 1 from a parent regarding joining SEPTA. We received 1 from a teacher regarding a student partnership. We received 8 from residents regarding a Facebook post by a board member. We received 1 from the Navy Acquisition Group regarding a virtual visit. And we received a letter from a family regarding the reopening plan.
Thank you, Mr. Paskoff. So as we move now, Dr. Burak, to the update from the task force, let's just reiterate what's taken place in a short period of time. Now, we opened up the school in September. This administration and the board have been aware of the issues from the beginning. We were prepared and did monitor everything that was going on based upon what we were seeing both in the public and from the health organizations. Decision was made by the board and the administration last month in the process of monitoring what was going on, was to look at what changes we can make, as we're constantly doing, and hopefully now tonight we'll get some information from you on what's taking place with that task force. I will note it's incredibly impressive that in such a short period of time that many people were able to work. So this board and this community is very appreciative of the amount of work that your staff and yourself and the administrators have been doing to try and get ourselves to the best position we can for our kids.
Sure. So as you know, one of the board goals this year is to constantly monitor the reopening plan. So we reconvened the task force because there were some issues with regard to especially the elementary level students, those who started the year off with full remote and who want an option to come back for the gold model or the in-person learning. So part of our monitoring was like trying to figure out a way we can do that better and to try to bring more students back into the school system for in-person learning. As Mr. Belmont just mentioned, just last month we sat here and we reconvened that task force. So it was reconvened to collaborate and deliberate on ways of bringing more kids back to in-person learning as the school year continues. 2 subcommittees were formed to discuss, one, the health and safety protocols, while the other was convened to discuss the instructional program impact based on the health and safety protocols of that committee and any recommendations that that committee might have. The subcommittees met weekly since our last board meeting, and building visitations were conducted also. There were several buildings where committee members went personally, physically, to look into classrooms, multiple classrooms in multiple buildings. And I think it's fair to say that most of the people realize that this is a complex issue. It was not a straightforward, it was not black and white as far as solving our issues right now. So the purpose of the committee, and the purpose of every committee, is to try to work together, try to collaborate, try to come up with fair compromises. So it's also fair to say that the elementary schools in this particular deliberation are very different scenarios than secondary schools. And even on the secondary level, middle school is a far different bird than the high school. So at this point, I'm going to ask Dr. Lynch for his committee's findings. I asked him to chair the health and safety protocols.
Thank you very much, Dr. Burek. So yes, the Health and Safety and Facilities Protocol Committee met. We met 3 times as a full committee and 2 times as a subcommittee visiting local or our own schools to do some really on-the-ground work. The primary goal of the committee was to get as many children back, but back safely. So it was kind of a balance between 2 goods. Kids belong in school, but they also belong in school safely. So with that in mind, we determined that the best way to proceed was the only way to get more kids back was to start to look at the social distancing protocols that we have in place. So currently, we established our current protocols over the summer, actually right after the state guidance came out. So our current protocol was based on the former way that the state had us measuring distance between desks. So our current protocol is 3 feet between desks, which gets us between 3 and 5 feet roughly. In the middle, right after school began practically, actually the last week of August, the state changed the way that we are permitted to measure. So rather than measuring desk to desk, we would measure student to student. So we saw that within that method of measurement, we actually could gain some space and perhaps see if we could have more kids into our current classrooms. That's why we decided we had to go to the buildings and we had to measure. We had to see people look at the desks to see what this would what it would be like. So we went and we spent an afternoon, 2 afternoons. We spent one afternoon at West End and the high school, and the other one at Marion Street and South. And with that in mind, we determined that there are, as Dr. Burek indicated, 3 very different realities here. Elementary, middle school, and high school probably need to be looked at completely separately due to the very natures of the buildings. Just think about it. West End and Marion Street and the high school all coming up on 100 years old, as opposed to our new schools, which were built in 1960. So that's kind of the way that we looked at it. So we tested various social distancing measures. We tested a 3-foot by 3-foot desk between people, and really every person on the committee determined that that was just too small. Not only was it perceived as not safe, it was just not practical. If you look at what 3 feet by 3 feet is, you can't walk rows. It just is not. It's not doable at all. We then tested 4 feet by 4 feet. There was no consensus in the committee, so some members of the committee found that that was a very acceptable spacing, while others did not find it acceptable. The principal reason why it was not acceptable was really not so much for safety as for instruction, because especially at our middle school, at our elementary schools, and at the middle schools, the kids are carrying everything. So their backpacks, their coats, all of that is on the backs of chairs, so we really found that that 4 by 4 really couldn't work. So then we came up with a distance that really everyone on the committee could live with. It was a good consensus, and that was 5 feet between desks, so 5 feet between the rows, and 4.5 feet deep between the desks front and back. We found that that spacing could be functional in some classrooms. It could gain you, in some classrooms, 3 desks. In some classrooms, 2 desks. In some classrooms, no desks. So therefore, we had to go through and actually, and I have to give credit to both Dr. Burek and Dr. Balekis, who on election day actually did a 3rd visitation to the schools, and with the custodians and Mr. Seda, actually spaced out literally every classroom in this district. So that is what was a great undertaking. So we determined that there would be a possible increase of capacity at the elementary and the middle schools. We determined that the high school is very tricky because of, first of all, some of the size of some of the rooms. You really could not even get an extra desk in at all. You look at some of the science labs and the art rooms, really that's just going to take a lot more thought. So we didn't want to hold up the stuff that we thought could get done, so we put elementary and the middle schools kind of on the front burner, and then we have to think about the high school a little bit more. We also determined that there may be rooms that are currently not in use that can be repurposed. So we're using every available space in this district. But with the cooperation of the principals, they thought, There are smaller spaces or full classrooms that we're using for other purposes, that if we move some stuff around, we might be able to repurpose those full classrooms for instruction. So we'll be adding the possibility of adding additional rooms. Some caveats that have to, kind of like little asterisks that we have to put on our findings. Based on this, students may not be able to attend their home schools. We may need to transport students. That has to be put on the table as part of what we were talking about. We also think that the current Gold families need to be apprised of the change in distancing because they may choose to opt into remote because of the changing in the social distancing. And then also, classroom teacher input is needed, and some teachers may not feel comfortable and may be looking for relief based on the new spacing. So those are kind of the first findings. Then it was very important to the committee that we think about a way to get all kids back in a safe way. That would require the elimination of all social distancing and the return to pre-pandemic configuration with the health and safety protocols in places, so we could have barriers and masking. That would require a resubmission of the district's reopening plan to state eds, so that's another little asterisk there. And then really, this is the thing that we have to really put our minds around, and this is why it's going to require some thought. What is the appropriate metric of an infection rate, either locally, at the county, at the island, where that would become appropriate? That requires a lot of consultation with the Nassau County Department of Health and with our own district medical director. So we kind of took all those findings together, and I have to say, it was an excellent committee. It was respectful, but no one held back their opinions. There are some very strong opinions. We were very happy that all the opinions were heard. These are the points that we reached consensus on, and really what we wanted to do was to get consensus here so that Dr. Balekis' committee could start their work and really look at the practical implications that this would have on kids.
Can I ask a question? You know, we're thinking about the classrooms at the middle school and high school level and the spacing and all that. I'm concerned about the time between classes when kids are bumping into each other in the hallway, and the hallways are, you know, traditionally narrower than a new high school, let's say. So my concern, and has anybody looked at that? I know we extended the passing time, and now we're talking about reeling it in a little bit, but is that a concern of anybody's?
Well, one of the
passing
concerns that
time?
we had as a committee, part of the health and safety protocols that would have to remain in place would probably be the one-way hallways. So once you start to put more children into an existing hallway that is now halved because they're being one way or the other, yes, that's going to have implications. That was thought about at the committee level.
That's more my concern than what's going on in the classroom when people are relatively stable and not passing and not bumping and not walking up and down steps. And I know we have designated one-way staircases and that sort of thing, but it still concerns me about that.
And I think that's why you see that the high school is also a different reality necessarily than the elementary schools or even the middle schools.
The only
Mr.
good
Lay-
thing about that is that the students are together in those hallways less than 10 minutes. So according to the Department of Health, if you're in that close proximity for less than 10 minutes, even though you're indoors, the bet is that you're safer than if you were there for an extended period of time.
Dr. Lynch, you mentioned having to resubmit the plan to state ed. Now, we've been making alterations since pretty much the day we came back to school. So at what point what were the changes that we made that actually puts us in a position where we do have to resubmit, and could you kind of walk us through that
Excellent point.
process
So-
a little bit in terms of the time frame?
So when you look at our current reopening plan, the general feeling of the committee was that by reducing it to 4.5 feet, it's not a material change to the plan that we currently have. However, once you start to go to pre-pandemic, desks up against each other, the classroom looks like it did in 2018, that is a substantive change that we would have to alert the state education department to, that we're not having minimal social distancing, we're having no social distancing. That would be the key metric there.
And we basically feel that the feeling is that this 5 feet between rows across and 4.5 feet between desks, front and back, that is really not social distancing.
Well, according to the state, so the definition of social distancing is 6 feet.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
the definition.
Okay.
So that's why we have masks and barriers, because we're not doing the 6 feet.
And so just so you know, that's why the district has to take its time with the contact tracing and make so many phone calls to people to tell them to quarantine. Because as per the Department of Health, they've been telling us to, wherever in a seating chart, there is a student who has tested positive, we are scooping out anyone who is in that less than 6-foot radius around that student, and we have to make the phone call and tell those students that they must quarantine for the next 14 days. So if anyone's following, I mean, everyone should know, the high school has made 61 students now quarantine. So, and we're still expecting more positive cases, so that grows. If we were 6 feet apart from the get-go, we wouldn't have had to tell any of those people to quarantine.
And can I just piggyback on that, because that's another point that I did not mention. One place where we must maintain 6 feet distancing is in all the eating areas. So currently, we're basically using our gymnasiums where the kids eat. Since they are maskless there for an extended period of time, that has to be at 6 feet. So that's going to be another limit to, if we get all kids in, how do you provide safe eating space for them?
And I'm saying this, not that I'm against doing this, because as we said, we want to bring all students back. This is just full disclosure and full transparency as to what our social distancing was and what we are proposing and what discussions have taken place. So it's just so that everybody is aware of that information clearly, and we're articulating it, and we're fully transparent as to what our plan was and what our plan might be. And next week, we'll be giving the formal recommendations to the board. But we want to provide you with these updates right now so that you have some time to start thinking about it before the recommendations are made.
But you know what's interesting about that? With all the voluminous paper that we get and we review and the hours we spend reading it, there's always something else that comes to mind. So in the direction we're going, where you're working very hard to try to get more kids into the school so we can do more education in the school, how do we contrast that if our numbers continue to rise? So if at some point, based upon a recommendation next week that we get from the administration and the committees, we come up with a date to start phasing in some more opportunities for kids to be in school, one, we have to take into account if the numbers continue to rise, that may make it difficult for us to implement that plan, because I'm not sure, and give me your insight on that, the difficulty we'll have in rolling back to where we are now if the numbers increase to a point where we end up being in a cluster. So I don't know how realistic that is. We may have to just go back to being remote instead of rolling ourselves back, because we have to take into account, and again, with all the paperwork, with all the reading we've done, I haven't thought about that till just now, once we phase in this new opportunity, this new situation, I don't know if we have the ability to roll back.
Correct.
And that's
Because as we've learned, when we thought we were going to be offering a choice to parents, and then when we couldn't offer that choice to parents, look at what has taken place, and then people made decisions based on that information. If now we make changes right now and we bring more people back, it will be very difficult to now parcel out those people back to the way it was, and you don't want to change people's lives. This is very uprooting for people. So as you say, the rollback would be going to full remote, as we've been
Right, so we have to
doing
keep-
now for the North, Middle, and West End
So when
and
we
the high
receive
school.
those recommendations next week, and obviously there's logistical issues involved because we still have to order, desks and other items, I would think, to implement anything we're doing, we have to almost have a sense of where we're at. We have to see progress and what COVID is doing to our community before we implement that. So I guess we could talk more about that next week, but one of the caveats have to be, in whatever plan we have, it has to be contingent upon us as a community and as our students maintaining good controls on that aspect of it. So.
But I think also what we've been saying all along is we're going to have these roller coaster rides. We're going to be in, we're going to be out, we're going to be in. We have to be flexible, and we've been saying that from day one, that I'm hoping that should the infection rate get very high and the governor or anyone else says that we have to go on remote, that it's not going to be for the remainder of the year like in the spring when it was for the whole spring. That it may be for a 2-week span, a 4-week span until the numbers get under control. Similarly to what you're seeing right now with the red zones, the yellow zones, and the orange zones. So they are, when they are rolling back in those particular zones, they are getting the numbers under control and the infection rate is going down. So once again, we have to abide by those zones in order to help get it down, and then hopefully it'll be a short, temporary period of time that we would go remote.
And it is impressive if you think about the short period of time when we had the yelling and screaming in the spring as to how remote teaching was going, to the ability now to be in school, to have a hybrid model, or full-time at the elementary level, and then flip a switch and go remote and still have the ability to keep education going. So we can't take for granted just how well we're doing in that aspect. So thank you, Dr.
Dr. Lynch.
Lynch.
Yeah, we've certainly come a long way. Go ahead.
Are there any, like, construction plans, monetary plans in order to do the things that you're, I don't know if that's part of Dr.
Well, I
Fletcher's
can
thing.
speak to what, and I am sorry that I forgot to mention what Mr. Belmont had just mentioned. This means buying desks, this means buying more shields. There is definitely a monetary impact. If we do have to transport, there's a monetary impact.
Any physical, like, you have to build something, you have to build a wall, you have to build,
Depending on to make some of those other spaces more useful, there may be some slight alterations that need to be done, yes.
And Dr. Lynch, also based on the idea that, you know, I know how tough it is to get furniture / construction materials / school supplies / PPE. So I'm assuming if we order desks, it's not going to be something that we're getting right away.
Yeah, that's something we discussed as a committee, that it could be 6-week lead time, depending on what, you know, how many people. In the summer, it was horrible lead time because everybody was ordering desks. We're hoping we might see a little bit better at this time. But we won't, you know, we've asked Mr. Seda to do some of that work really as we speak.
Has there been good compliance with quarantine, or is quarantining something relatively new that we don't have any compliance statistics yet?
So when we ask people to quarantine, we don't know if they're truly quarantining.
So is there any follow-up by the Department of Health or anything?
They'll follow up with the COVID-positive individual.
Okay.
They're not going to follow up
With the
with
quarantine.
everyone necessarily. In the beginning, they were. And if you go back to, I want to say late spring,
Right.
that's what the CDC was actually saying. Contact tracing is great, is a great strategy in the beginning of a pandemic, towards the end of a pandemic, but not as it's ratcheting up or in the height of it. So they just get so overwhelmed.
Right, right. And there's no, like, we don't have any recourse. I mean, in the schools, we really haven't seen it yet because it's so new, of these quarantine kids pushing to get back in, or parents pushing to get them the
No,
kids
and
back in.
we're very grateful
Right.
that the parents, when we're calling them, they, you know, for the most part, some of them have already said, we know, we were already chosen to stay at home for the next 2 weeks, and then others are being notified. Others who weren't part of a social gathering, whatever, and are being surprised by the phone call just by the nature of where they're sitting in the classroom.
Right.
So that's what we have to do. And I think people just need to realize when they do have those social gatherings and everything, and then the impact on their classmates, if that student becomes COVID positive, then the impact on that family, then all the household contacts have to stay home. You're impacting then, you know, parents who may
Right.
not be able to go to work because everyone has to quarantine. So I just think we have to really work a little harder to try to keep everyone safe and realize the consequences of our actions.
I have one follow-up for Dr. Lynch. The desks, just to clarify, the reason we have the same number of kids in district roughly as we did pre-COVID, but we need more desks, is because we've taken so many desks out of the classrooms and put them into the gyms in every building
correct.
for kids to eat lunch.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
We've
It's,
also,
so it's not a different type of desk. We just,
No, it's the
we had to sacrifice
And then,
all
for
those
example,
desks.
this was, we've never had desks in the kindergarten center.
Right.
I mean, the kindergarten center was beautiful, tables and the kids sitting on things. When you go into the kindergarten center now, it is rows, it is.
Okay. Thank you.
So thank you, Dr. Lynch. And from what I'm hearing, because there are different scenarios on the elementary, middle, and high school, we're really truly looking at a phase-in approach on how to handle this. We really don't want to delay one particular group while we're still discussing other levels. So we really want to try to bring back, and we mean what we say, we want to try to bring back as many kids as we possibly can, as soon as we can. So based on the information and the new social distancing consensus that the Health and Safety Subcommittee came up with, that information was then provided to Dr. Baleka so that he can meet with his subcommittee, and they actually had a follow-up meeting just today. So the latest information from his subcommittee will now be shared.
thank you, Dr. Burek. And thank you to Dr. Lynch and his subcommittee. I know that our work wasn't possible until they set the parameters for us all to work within. So we did actually have 3 meetings as well. One before we had a recommendation from the facilities group, and then 2 afterward, the latest being today. Using the information, what we did actually, the rooms were measured by the facilities group, and we had new numbers. So originally we had specific capacities in each room, and then we have a new set of capacities, and we looked level by level, room by room, class by class, to see which students we can accommodate, and really spend some time trying to see, in, like Dr. Burek said, different phases, who we can bring back to school. So our phase 1 group that we discussed right off the bat were the elementary students. Right now, elementary students have a choice between being full remote and being at home. We really were trying to see, can we offer all of the students who are full remote an opportunity to return to school? Well, we did actually put out a survey as a district to put out some feelers to see who would actually be interested in possibly coming back. So the 3 choices that were given were, I am very interested in coming back, I may be coming back, I'm on the fence, I'm not sure, and the last choice is I'm definitely not coming back. Based on our past experiences with surveying during the summer, we wanted to take a very conservative approach as a subcommittee. So we looked at the responses of those that said they were intending to come back and those that said they might come back, and made that our target audience. So we did use that information. So all of the things that I'm going to say right now are based on that information. So we took those numbers of people that might be interested in coming back or are interested in coming back and compared them in each building by grade to the new seating arrangements that we had to see, using those available seats, can we accommodate these students? So when we went through, the kindergarten center can accommodate these students who said, again, that they might be coming back or that they were definitely coming back. You know, I don't have exact information for each grade about the entire subset. You know, I will tell you that if we did look at the entire subset, some of those things that Dr. Lynch had mentioned before about kids going into different buildings, we may have to revisit those type of things. One of the things that we were talking about as a group was sending out another survey that would be a letter of intent or a commitment, and on that survey putting a caveat so that people know that, look, these are the choices right now that we want you to choose, and if we can do these things, we'd like you to commit to them for the year. But if they can't be done based on the number of responses, we will be coming back with another survey to give you a different set of choices depending on what the responses look like, and if it's an overwhelming response, we may need to revisit. So we did want to put that out front so that, you know, that could be something that comes down the pike. But again, based on the data set that we have right now, it looks like the kindergarten center can accommodate all of their students. The same can be said for the students who, again, might be coming back or
are definitely intending to come back based on our survey data for both Waverly Park and Marion Street School. So what I'm saying is when we say bringing children back in, we'd be talking about folding them into current sections. So the remote teachers, students would be going to an in-person classroom teacher that may not be their remote teacher. I just want everybody to be clear about that. All right, when they come back into the classroom, they will be brought into the fold of another classroom. We actually talked about as a committee, try to make sure that we give teachers enough lead time so that they can welcome those children and make them feel like they've been here all year long. You know, we want to make that a very smooth and welcoming transition, especially for some of our youngest. So that was very important. Now, West End School is a little bit different than the others. You know, we did have more students actually choose to be full remote at West End. So we are talking about a larger population that has interest in coming back. So if we, again, use the survey results as our guide here, you know, with the students that may be coming back or were intending to come back, we can fit grades 1 and 5 very similarly to the other two buildings. Grades 2, 3, and 4 are a different story. You know, trying to fold them back into existing classes, if all of those students do intend to come back and they do show up, we can't fit them in the same way, even given the new restrictions on, you know, the measurements. So what we would need to do is open up new sections. We do have 3 spaces that we're looking at West End School, which we would use, one for the 2nd grade, one for the 3rd, and one for the 4th grade, where we can bring in a teacher to teach those kids in a section. So some of those children may end up being folded back into other classes, and others might be in these new spaces with most likely one of the remote teachers, or if we have to shuffle staff, there may be some movement of staff. And this is something that we did talk about as a committee, that there's a possibility that given the new constraints, we may have some current staff members who are teaching in person that may be moved to remote for medical reasons. We may have some sections of our remote classes, because if a lot of children are coming back, and we did look at the numbers, it may be possible to take our 2 remote classes on each grade level and reduce it by a section, which would free up a teacher who can come and teach the in-person classes. So again, depending on when the survey results come in, we can decide who's teaching them, but we do have 3 spaces at West End that we are looking at repurposing for the sake of opening up these sections for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. So that basically right now, based on the survey data, we should hopefully be able to house our students in their home schools. I will tell you that was a very heated topic at our 2nd meeting, that when we opened up the possibility of having students bus to other schools just to make the numbers work, people were not interested in that. People wanted to be in their home schools. So we worked very hard to reallocate spaces, work numbers, and it does seem like, again, based on this preliminary data, that should work. Once we have the actual data in hand, that's something we will look at again.
And Dr. Belikas, before you go on, going back to your question, Mr. Yeager, that would be one of the buildings where some construction work will be necessary to create a classroom to accommodate that.
Okay, so continuing in that vein too, when we open up a new section in a building, it's important to realize, so again, this West End situation would create a little bit more of a challenge than other things. When you're put into a existing class, you'd be taking all of their specials with that class and things like that. So that makes it a little bit easier. When we open up sections, we may or may not be able to accommodate the specials with teachers from that building. If you are on remote right now, you do have teachers from all different buildings providing the specials. When I mean specials, I'm talking about things like art, music, science, and so on. So those classes are possibly going to have to be taught remotely. We will have to, again, once we have numbers and we can start building schedules, look at that. But again, they would have their in-person classes with their classroom teacher for the majority of the day. The specials may be remoted into the room. Some of these services that are provided to students, regardless if they're in those classes or being folded back into other sections throughout the district, their reading classes and math labs and things like that, may be a remote session for certain children, again, because those classes are very, they're specified, they're specific, and I may not be, I'm in reading and Dr. Bergman is in reading, but we're not reading the same exact level. So I'm on a level K, she's on a level. H, we can't necessarily be put in the same room. I need to stay with my reading group. So again, some of those logistical type of things may cause certain things to be remote, just again for full disclosure so people understand that.
And Dr. Bellick, just to
Yes.
clarify that again, when you say those specials may be done by remote teaching, the class would be in person in the building. There would be an adult in the room with them supervising them, but the actual teacher, so the art teacher or the science teacher, may be in another building elsewhere, and they would be using technology to remote into the students who are in person.
That is absolutely correct. And I have to say, too, there are certain classes throughout the district, some at the elementary level, some at the middle school, and at the high school. And I've witnessed several of them where the teachers are working remotely with the students so that they are being broadcast into the room where another adult is sitting with their class. So yes, that would be the same situation we're discussing right now.
Thank you.
So that's pretty much the elementary level. That's where we started, and we were calling that our first phase of trying to bring back the elementary students. Now, what happened at the middle school? We started talking about who were our priority students, and we kind of sort of developed a phase 0. So what we would like the board to consider tonight, because this is something that we don't necessarily have to wait on, is that we were looking at different groups of children and who should be our priority to come back as soon as possible. And we really felt that it's important to get our youngsters back that have special needs. And when I use special needs, I want to say that it's a little bit broader than special education needs. So we do have children with IEPs that we would be looking at, as well as what we call English language learners who are part of our E&L program. So we do think that there's a priority for those students to get back into school. We know that the guidance documents that came from the State Department do encourage to make exceptions for these students and to give them the educational opportunities they need. So we would recommend trying to bring those students back as soon as possible. We did look at numbers in each of the middle schools and trying to figure out logistics. So we are pretty confident that we can make this happen in a fairly quick manner to bring these students back so that the children who are either fully remote special education or here on a hybrid model, we would like to offer them daily instruction in person, because we do think it's important for these students who are, struggling academically at home to be in here live with a teacher. So that is our first group that we were thinking.
That's not something
Yes.
that's going to be done through a survey, though, right?
No, this would not be done through a survey. This would be reaching out directly to the students and their families involved and making an offer for them to return full-time, and they would work that out. The buildings would be contacting them and working out the logistics with each family.
Great.
And I do think that our committee, like I said, felt very strongly that, yes, it is very difficult for all students at home. But when you do have a youngster with any type of special needs, like I said, whether it not be IEP driven or be an English language issue, that these children really are struggling mightily. And that was the first group that people wanted to prioritize. The second group that people wanted to look at the middle school at our committee were what we call the at-risk students. In each of our buildings, we have IST meetings, which are our instructional support teams. You may hear about them as social, emotional learning meetings as well, depending on the nomenclature used in each building. But the basic bottom line is we're talking about our at-risk students that may or may not be the classified students that I had just mentioned, whether or not they're classified E&L or special needs, but we know need to be here every day for some type of reason. So that is something that I think our IST teams, they wanted to give them the ability to look at those students and figure out ways to bring them back into school as well. So that is something that the committee also felt strongly about. There was also suggestions about trying to maybe reach out to families and confirm, again, the level of those needs. So that is something that was strongly felt that we needed to do. The other group that we would like to also look at would be bringing back, the next group would be the green students. So those that are on full remote, we would like to look at bringing them back as hybrid students, and that would be our phase 2 grouping there. So that, like I said, phase 1 would be our elementary school. Phase 2, we'd like to get more students back in the at middle schools as well. Now, we are pretty close on our numbers in the middle schools. We don't exactly fit 100% with all of the special education students every day and all the green students every other day, but it is very close. So once we put out that survey, like we said, there's going to be a little bit of a caveat on it. We are pretty sure that we can get back with, minimal, tweaks here and there to be able to bring back these green students on a hybrid schedule. We do have to see the numbers and, make sure, but it is pretty close. And when I say pretty close, what we're talking about is we have a few sections in each building that may have, if every kid comes back and takes us up on our offer, meaning all the children with the special needs and all of the green students, that we have maybe 1 or 2 kids in a classroom without a desk right now. So what that would mean is creativity. We've been trying to do as many creative things as possible. So we may have to flip a couple of children that are A to L to the M to Z. So I can let you return, but I know that your name is Paleshi, but, I need to put you on the other side, so you're not going to be in with the P's, you're going to be on the other end. So that's the kind of stuff that may happen. We may have certain teachers who are teaching in a specific room. And I've been teaching math in this room, but I only can fit 18 people here. Next door, my friend Dr. Berman is teaching English, and she's got a room that can fit 20 people, and I need 20 people in my class, and she only has 15. We may be switching rooms. So there are things like that that may be necessitated. We may need to, and again, it's a little bit easier in a middle school and a high school, rearrange a few people's schedules. So I might be able to bring you back, and if you look at the teaming and those type of things that happen in a middle school, I may have to switch your English from period 3 to period 7. You're still going to have Dr. Berman, but in order to make those rooms fit. So there's a lot of things that have been discussed, but I just want to put it out there so that there are options that we have that we may need to be a little bit more creative than we are being in the elementary schools to make the middle schools work. But that's pretty much what we were looking at the middle school level. I don't know if anybody had any questions about that.
Dr. Lex, I just want to
Yes.
get a better understanding of it. So on the elementary school level, with this plan, which again, I know next week we'll have a full recommendation from you, the hope is that anybody that's remote now wants to come back. We're hopeful, again, we'll wait to see what happens, that should be taken care of. We can check off the box that at the elementary school level, anyone remote who wants to come back to school full-time, for the most part, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it next week with the recommendation, they should be able to do it. That's what you're looking for?
Yes, that's our understanding at the moment based on
Right, so right now,
the survey results.
so that's
we have.
one end of the spectrum. It seems like at the elementary school level, that's the easier fix for us. The high school seems to be on the other end of that spectrum.
Yes, we haven't gotten there yet,
Right.
but yes, absolutely.
Okay. And then the middle school, which is the first part of secondary, because we typically have the elementary school and secondary, but we're going to break up for the purpose of your explanation, middle school from high school now as you go into the other explanation of that.
Yes, and a big part of that too is back to what Dr. Lynch said. When we start talking about the facilities and things like that, we did have a little bit, really, more room in the middle school to put extra students when we don't have that same ability in the high school where, as he said, this is a very old building with some irregularly shaped rooms in some floors on our building that don't necessarily have that nice rectangular shape where we can add more desks. And that's something that we do need to take a look at. And when I say rectangular shape, things like, even the heaters get in the way. And that collapses the room and may or may not allow a row to be entered. And I know those are the type of things that Dr. Lynch and his committee were looking at. They were looking at all these specific things because the square footage could be the same. But when you have those irregularities in the room, doesn't just allow the rows to fit the way you would like sometimes. All right. And I don't know if you had any
No,
further questions.
That's, I
Okay.
just wanted to clarify step by step so I can understand and comprehend it. Thank you.
Sure, and I think also too, if all these things don't work out the way that we were hoping in the middle school, and these adjustments don't work, the committee is committed to coming back to the table and meeting together to again discuss other tweaks we can look at to try to accommodate more of the green family. So it is something that was very important to the committee that we make this work one way or the other.
And let's just reiterate at that point also to make sure that the board administration are on the same page as well as the community that Whether we engage a committee full-time to look at something, this is constantly being monitored by the administration. Teachers are reporting to the principals are reporting to administration. So whatever we're doing, whatever plans we have, just like you've done from the beginning and just like we did last year, whether committees are in place for certain aspects of this, we're constantly monitoring what's going on. It's a combination of how the educational process is going, what's going on with COVID, what's going on in the community. This is not something that's just this is a phase and we're leaving it alone. We're constantly monitoring and overseeing this, just like we have from the beginning.
Yes, that's no different, and I will tell you that some of the things that we're discussing right now, pre-committee were happening. You know, we did have students that were high needs children that may have had real major concerns for their special education needs or their E&L needs, and we brought them back before this committee even started to meet. You know, once the committee started meeting, we felt it was important to let the process play out and make some priority decisions as a group. But some of the kids, like I said, we had been bringing back. So, you know, based on whatever guidance I received from you tonight, we may start going again back to some of our more high-need students and bringing them back according to their needs.
Right, like you said, Dr. Lex, we started school in September, and 1 month into the school year at a board meeting, we already had information from the administration on how that process was going and some insight that you wanted to, what changes you wanted to make and how you wanted to go about doing that. There's no reason that the board nor the community should think that's going to stop, because that's what this administration has been doing since last year. So please continue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the high school. So like I said, that the middle schools we were looking at as our phase 2 group. So our phase 3 group at the high school, unfortunately, like Dr. Lynch mentioned, we are not working with as ideal spaces as we would like. So we did want to keep the same type of priorities that we had in the middle school. So again, with your permission, we'd like to look at prioritizing bringing back some of our special needs students full-time here. That we'd be, again, same process as Mr. Yeager had asked about before, reaching out to the families involved and making that invitation. We would also, again, then move on to our at-risk students, so those that have come up at the IST at the high school, and see what kind of accommodations we can make for them. At the moment, we don't have the spaces to bring in the green students yet, but that doesn't mean that that won't constantly be looked at. I know that Dr. Lynch's group, again, was looking at the high school spaces, but we did want to move forward in areas where we could. So we are trying to move the elementary and the middle schools forward while we still explore those opportunities to look at the green students in the high school about bringing them back on a hybrid.
However, some of those special needs students or at-risk students could be in the green model, so you, by offering to bring them back, you could also be satisfying the green student the ability to come back.
Absolutely, yes. The special, needs students, whether or not, like I said, they're the ones with IEPs or E&L students, yes, they could be either green or hybrid. But again, these are children that we have concerns about academically that we really do think it's important that we offer them in-person instruction. So that is something that we are looking at, absolutely. You know, the other group that we were talking about, and this is pretty much what we'll talk about with the district, and I know that Dr. Lynch's group had these discussions as well. You know, I don't think anyone in this district is not committed to bringing back all of these students when it's safe. And I think that it was very important that we discussed as a phase 4, offering the return to all of our secondary students once those conditions allow. And some of those conditions, as Dr. Lynch had mentioned, would be, that real reduction on the social distancing back to more normal distances that we've seen in the past and such. But we were just starting to the ideas and throwing out ideas of what the conditions may be, but nobody felt comfortable defining those as of the moment. But we did want to at least make sure that we put that to the table, that everybody does have the desire and commitment. And I think that's, all of us here, it's the teachers, it's the students, everybody would love to be back to normal as soon as the conditions allow for that to happen. So that was, again, just a very strong sentiment of the committee, even though we're not ready to go through the details there yet. Some of the miscellaneous items that we did discuss, and I know that this came up a few minutes ago, we did want to recommend as a committee reducing the passing time. Right now, we had increased this year the passing time to 10 minutes in between periods. There were several parents on the committee who were vocalizing that their children at home don't use that time
to separate from a screen that quite often it becomes time to socialize or play video games, and they're not taking that as a break anyway. The children in school, some of them are getting to their classes and sitting there for a significant portion of time before the period begins. That was one opinion that came to the table. There was a little bit of hesitancy for certain subject areas where you have to do a setup. So we have right now, we don't share things the way we used to. We try to give kids individual setups in places like an art class or a science lab or special education students with their manipulatives. We do try to give them individual setups. So we did think it was important to keep some extra time, as well as Mr. Paskoff had mentioned before about navigating the hallways. So the time that we were looking at was changing to 6 minutes in between periods. So it would still be more than we've had in the past, but it wouldn't be as great as the 10 minutes of what we were dealing with right now. And people thought that was a good balance. But, you know, given the fact that it is only 6 minutes, and I did say there are certain subjects that are going to have their hands full trying to get the technology up and running, maybe even traveling between classrooms, getting the kids settled, getting all those individual materials out. If we did that reduction, it would just have to be known to everyone involved, the kids in the classroom, the kids at home, that some of the periods, even though the classroom bell rang, it may be 2 or 3, 4 minutes, whatever it may be, for the actual instruction to start, because of the fact that their little cushion that we've had has evaporated. So that's just important for everybody to understand.
But the expectation is that the student be in attendance right after that 6 minutes.
Absolutely. And that was one of the things, too, that we were talking about, too. One of the things that's happened, and especially at the middle school level right now, if all the kids show up to class in the person and online early, some of the teachers have opened up the class early because the kids are ready to learn. Now, there are certain kids, though, we know, that won't log on until they know they have to. If we set the time a little bit earlier and they know the expectation is to go on, that they may be able to start the class on time, and everybody has that expectation that that's going to happen. You know, so it's either we hope that they all get there early and try to take minutes back that way, or come up with the understanding that the class may be a little bit slower to get going, and the committee really wanted to lean on the fact that they'd rather be okay, you know, so we'll give everybody the expectation, the kids are in those seats with the understanding that the teacher may need some more time to get the class started and the instruction to begin. So that did seem to be the preferable of the two evils that the committee chose.
But with a 40% reduction time in hall passing, which is what it amounts to, and then, but we possibly said that if we bring more kids in, then we're gonna have to go to more one-way hallways. So now we have more two-way hallways, so we'd have to go to one-way hallways with more kids, because if you're worried about the congregating in the hallways of the kids and you're in more one-way hallways, wouldn't it potentially take longer to get from class to class?
It may potentially take longer, and I think, you know, again, this is the word of the year, it's called flexibility. So when your kids are there and they're ready to learn and you're ready to start teaching them, we start class. And if we give people more time, basically what, you know, this is kind of like, and I know this is going to start sounding like a movie, but, you know, if you build it, they will come. So if we leave that extra time, they're going to use it, certain kids, and they're going to take advantage of that. If we cut back the time, the feeling of the committee was that the kids will find a way to at least get there close to that time, as opposed to giving them too much time. And they actually felt like sometimes when you give them too much time, they're actually more apt to be late because they think they have more minutes, or they can get away with, you know, look, I can play one more game on my Xbox, or I'll get another snack from the fridge. They felt like when you try to keep them moving from one thing to another, you're less likely to lose them in between for the kids that are at home. For the kids that are in school, again, it probably keeps them from talking as much in a hallway or trying to congregate in a hallway. It'll keep you moving because you know you have somewhere to get to, and you need to get there in a shorter period of time. So there's all these things. But I have to say, though, just watching in our hallways, and I know that Mr. Pascal was a little bit concerned about the narrowness, our kids have been doing a really good job in the hallway, like surprisingly well. You know, that they do seem to follow along in the directions that they're supposed to. They are moving, and they are not congregating the ways that they've had in the past. So the traffic flow this year has been really good compared to what I've seen in the previous years. So
And Dr. Blex, could I just clarify also, it's not that our committee was recommending extra one-way hallways. It's that when all the kids come back, we still may need to live with the existing one-way hallways for the remainder of the year, for example, if the virus is.
Well, philosophically, I have a question then. The 10-minute hall passing, was the 10-minute hall passing, philosophically, was it there for kids to take 10 minutes to get to class? Or was it for teachers and students who are staring at a screen all day long? You know, I'm a teacher. I'm staring at a screen much more now than I have ever in the last 25 years combined. So the passing to me, philosophically to me, is a break. Now, I don't get that break because we only have a 4-minute passing, and I teach 3 in a row. So my eyes are shot by the third period. So to me, the 10-minute passing was less about the time that it took to get to class and more about, you know, the break that I may need, the teacher may need, the student may need from staring at a screen 9 periods in a row. But I'm just curious if that's the case here.
The answer, I guess, to your question was yes and yes, in the sense that all of these things were taken into account originally, you know, about people staring at screens and such. And there was more concern about the children at home than the staff and students in school staring at a screen, because we do know that most teachers don't teach 9 periods. You know, most teachers at the secondary level are teaching 5 or 6 at most. So there are some times during the day when they have a break. These students in school obviously are not on their computer the whole time. The group that we were most concerned about screen-wise were the kids at home, who many children do have 9 or 10 period days, even in certain cases, limited, but certain cases. So that we were worried about them not having the screen breaks. What was very apparent from the parents on the committee was that they're not taking screen breaks anyway. The first thing that most of their children were doing in between, they said, was either taking out their remote controller and playing a video game, or flipping out their phone so they can FaceTime with their friends or whatever mode of communication they use their phone for. That they were not using that time productively to get away from a screen. They were switching from one screen to another. So that is something that they said it's not worth the time when they're not using it that way. We did have concerns, especially at the beginning of the year, about children navigating the hallways. We did see that they have been getting better at that. You know, after the first, I'd say 2 weeks of school, for the most part, they've gotten the flow down. They know which hallways, like Dr. Lynch was mentioning earlier, were one way, which ones are the 2 ways, and how to best navigate from one room to another. So all those things did come into play. What we have seen a lot of, though, are people that are concerned, both, you know, teachers and parents, that we are losing a lot of instructional time. A reduction from 10 minutes to 6 minutes, like you said, a 40% reduction there recovers you 4 minutes a day, times most classes are 5 days a week. That's 20 minutes a week. You know, that means that you've gotten basically in most months, depending on holidays and all that kind of stuff, an additional 2 class periods. And people that are teaching towards Regents exams or AP exams are, you know, very interested in that time. I know that one of the teachers that was on the committee representing the high school was a teacher who has both an AP and a Regents class and really wanted instructional minutes back. So there were, you know, folks that are looking for those type of things as well. And it is a lot of instructional time that people were looking at.
So, Dr. Belekas, the extra time will go back into those individual classes then? It won't just disappear, it will go into those individual classes?
Yes, it would not just disappear. The point would be to recover time in classrooms so that people could, you know, basically have more instruction.
So then it would be a reorganization of the bell schedules and that
Yes.
whole thing?
Yes. You know, and very similarly, the elementary schools, one of the ideas that was put to the table right now, we have a half-hour drop-off period in the morning. And again, in the beginning of the school year, people were saying that was very important to have all of that time. And they were also considering, and one of the things we could be talking about next week as well, would be looking at, do we need all that time in the morning? You know, there were vocal parents and teachers and administrators that were saying maybe we can cut that time in half. So I think one of the things we could discuss is whether or not we think that, you know, instead of an 8:30 to 9 o'clock drop-off, would an 8:30 to 8:45 drop-off be sufficient? And again, because of speed and, you know, things that have gotten better since the beginning of school. But that was another idea that was batted around at the table as well. And, you know, again, similar vein there. The last thing that we did talk about as a group, and I think that it's important to try to make sure that we communicate as well as we can if we do start creating timelines for things to get that information out to both our staff members and the parents as soon as possible so that they have an understanding of what's happening. The faculty members thought it was very important so that they could be very welcoming of their new students when they are received, and the parents so that they can plan their lives according to what their new schedules would look like. So those were other requests that came up. And we did also throw around the same time frame as Dr. Lynch, that if we are trying to purchase materials, that many of the things that we're talking about when they require desks and barriers and such would take at least approximately 6 weeks to get those materials in.
So 6 weeks really brings us to the end of the year. It doesn't even bring us to before the winter recess, does it? Today's the 10th, right? Has anybody looked at that calendar? I'm just going to take a quick look at my calendar here.
Well, let's just play out what you're saying, Mr. Pasco. If your speculation is if it ends up being close to the end of the year,
6 weeks, 6 is one break.
I'm anticipating that
Yeah,
you're,
it comes to the 22nd is 6 weeks.
well, if it goes that late and we're not able to do it, it'll have to get pushed to January.
Right.
I mean, I would like to see us try to do it, even if it's a week before, just so we can see how it operates, get the kinks out, kind of figure out what works, what doesn't work, and if we can get it done. That's why I always like coming back to school before Labor Day. You get a couple days to see what it's like, and then we can implement changes, and then whatever we figured out, administration, the staff can go ahead over break and address it. But obviously, we can't physically get that done or not, then, you know, but the other issue is too, you know, Thanksgiving and school break can become hotspots for us, you know. Are people going to take Thanksgiving and go away and gather? Are people going to take, you know, December break and winter break to go ahead and gather? And that also brings up the possibility of what happens in February also. So we'll have to use those for gauges to see what impact it'll have as we increase the population at the same time. So there's a lot there. But I guess to that point, if a big part of it is the logistical aspects of facilities, that'll be a big, even if we have a potential date to begin this phase and process, it will be contingent upon when we have a better sense of what the
Receiving the
Receiving
equipment
it.
and
Okay.
getting it ready.
But at least by next week, we'll get a recommendation from you and at least have that plan, know what the contingency, and at least the community will know. And I guess at the latest it would be implemented when we got back from break if we can't get that done beforehand. Okay.
And don't forget, the December board meeting will be before that time anyway, so we can make an announcement as to where we are at that point. Do we have the desks? Are we preparing the rooms?
Right.
And when we're ready to bring the kids back.
So, Dr. Lux, just so I'm clear, just to sum up, it seems like you feel fairly confident that all the elementary school kids who are currently fully remote and the middle school kids who are fully remote, with some creativity, we feel strongly that we may be able to bring them all back if they choose to come back, the ones who choose to come back. And at the high school level, it seems like that's not the case, possibly just special needs students?
I think at the moment that's fair to say. You know, I do think at the high school level, and I know that Dr. Lynch had mentioned this as well, I think we need to do a little bit more fact-finding before we can make a full decision about the high school. But based on the current information that we have at the moment, it does seem like it is a very real possibility of doing exactly what you said. You know, one of the other things that makes it a little bit more difficult at the middle level to get as best of a gauge as we did at the elementary schools, we did pretty much get full information from our survey, meaning we've got respondents to the survey at almost a perfect level. At the middle school, respondents were sporadic at best, and the high school was very similar. So, you know, it's hard to make a gauge when, you know, only a fraction of the people eligible actually respond to the survey. So that makes it a little bit trickier. But yes, my gut is exactly what you just said.
And so based upon that plan, because Mr. Pileski pulling out his law book there with the maybe and possibly and appreciate, because we've learned that there's so many different factors that changes, but it's nice to know we have a plan that's really in such a short period of time, trying to get as many kids as we can. It seems like it can happen at the elementary school level, and then we prioritize as we move up with our special needs population. Other than this, the surveys aren't always accurate, as we've learned. So when you're saying it's contingent upon factors, I would assume next week we're going to get a recommendation, and even the phase-in date, as we've just discussed, even with the most definitive dates, are all going to be contingent upon something. What are the factors you're waiting to see to know where you can do that implementation? Will that be when parents let you know what their plan is to come in or not come in? That's pretty much the fact.
Absolutely, that's the biggest factor that's remaining now. One of the things, again, if we do get permission from you folks tonight, and I haven't heard any opposition to it, to start offering return to some of our special needs populations, those responses are already going to start giving us some of that data. Because if they turn us down, that's already opening up some slots that may not have been available. So that'll be our first set of data that comes in. When we put out the survey to the other group, that'll be my next set of data. So like I said, we're not talking about too many children that we need to say that they do want to continue at home to be able to fit the rest. So we're talking about ones and twos in classrooms. We're not talking about I need 10 people out of 30 to say that they're staying home. No, I'm talking about I need 2 out of 22 or things like that. And it's a very limited amount of classes we're talking about. We're not talking about every class in the building. We're talking about probably, between 10 and 20 classes total.
And while
we're
this
not
may
talking about large numbers.
And while this may be a
And that's
phase,
the middle school, just so I'm clear.
no, I understand that. And let's be clear, while this is a phase-in approach, the opportunity for parents is not phased in. You're going to let parents know we need to know by a certain date because everyone's contingent upon that. If they don't answer it, they're waiving that. And it's not like come December 21st, a parent can come in. Maybe they can. I mean, based on what you're saying, it is possible that we may have an elementary school situation where that kid says, I'm staying remote, and if they change their mind and you have the space, do they have the opportunity to come in if the space is there? Or you would like to shut that at a certain point and say, listen, I need to know by X date what we're doing, and we can't add 1 or 2 as we dribble through?
The problem, it becomes very complicated. If we have the space for in-person learning and a remote student wants to come in person, that's one thing. But if we have created sections for in-person learning and now we've reduced the number of remote learning, we cannot afford the same opportunity for if you're a Gold family to go to remote. If it means creating another section and another teacher, we cannot do that.
Right.
So full transparency, we cannot do that. So the commitment that we're asking for is really a commitment for the year with the realization.
And we'll communicate what that date is and what we need to know by, okay?
Because if I recall, one group who didn't get to make a choice at all were families who moved to the district after the date.
Correct.
And through no fault of their own, really haven't gotten a choice this
Correct.
entire time.
Correct.
And the
But
reality.
at least on the elementary level, now they'll be given that
Right.
option.
Right, so in
Now
the
they'll have
elementary
a
school they
choice.
can, but secondary, maybe middle school, maybe not as likely at high school unless it's part of the special needs population.
Correct.
Right, good.
And in terms of that, like, informal survey that you sent out and base your numbers off of that, that's allowing us to have an idea of how many students might be coming back. But eventually, we are going to ask families for a decision. And is it fair to say that's going to be a binding decision
Yes,
eventually? So
Yes.
that we don't get burned
yes.
like we kind of did
So,
a few
correct.
months ago?
So our goal is, the task force is actually meeting again as a full task force on this Friday. Dr. Lynch and Dr. Belekas will share the recommendations that will be shared with the board with the task force, so that they see the full recommendations first, and then the board will see the recommendations next Wednesday. The following day, we would like to send out the survey, basically the intent. It's really not a survey anymore.
Correct.
It's the intent of
Not a
what you're
survey.
choosing now for your new learning model.
So just to be clear in my head, the only people that will be invited back full-time, non-hybrid, would be certain special ed children, or special needs children,
Correct.
not the average student, but the special needs student.
At the secondary level, that is correct.
Right,
At the
okay.
elementary school, we're trying to offer that to everybody. So just so we keep the levels separated, but yes.
But it's fair to say that the conversation for that is not over. So both of the committees recognize that, you know, that there's still more work and more discussion to be done on that, and then we'll probably meet again in December, you know, after the Thanksgiving break, to discuss then that. But we don't want to hold up any of these other phases. Why prevent the elementary folks the opportunity to come in while we're still trying to hash out the secondary level?
And to Mr. Pelesi's point, while we'll be definitive in what they're deciding, what they're telling us, as things change, as the environment changes, as the virus changes, that will be the unknown factor that can alter what we're doing. So again, at some point, we're going to get back into school full-time. At some point, we're not going to have the partition. Now, who knows when that may be, but we're always open. That's why we're monitoring things. That's why we as an administration, as a board, are constantly being updated on what changes are. So this is the plan we have as of now. Next week, we'll get a formal recommendation from the administration. We'll make a decision as a board how to move forward, and that will be our plan. And it may be 6 weeks, or maybe it's December 20th or January 5th. That does not mean that come December 15th, December 10th, there aren't world events in our community or other places that impact our decision to do that. So as we've said since March and April, we have to be fluid. We have to understand this is constantly changing. But the idea is we very quickly came up with a plan that addresses a lot of the needs of our population.
Correct.
Well, I think it's a great job. I think in a very short period of time, you got a lot of people together, gather a great deal of information, and really work very hard. And as we see, you know, to the point where when you start getting out rulers, and you start measuring what you're doing, it shows a great deal of effort. It's great to know that we had the community involved, the administration involved, our teachers involved. So definitely look forward to the formal recommendation next week so we can get ourselves going and come up with this plan and implement it. So thank you again for always with the continuous hard work. Anything else on the task force? Anything else on the board? Just have a few items on the agenda. On the consent agenda, I'd like to ask for a consent agenda on resolutions 2011 NC1 through 2011 NC12 and 2011 G1 through 2011 G7. May I have a motion for the consent agenda to Mrs. Hanson, second Mr. Yeager, all in favor. I'd like to ask for a motion to accept the consent agenda. Thank you, Mr. Paskoff, second Mr. Yeager, all in favor. And now I'd like to have a motion to adjourn to go into executive session to discuss matters of personnel. Mr. Pelesi, Mr. Paskoff, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hope everyone stays safe. Hope everyone's making smart decisions. Social distancing, wearing masks, curtailing the parties. Look forward to following up with you at our next meeting next week. Good night.